it's a very simple mathematical equation which almost doesn't fail. If you're starting from zero, you might have a long way, but the thing in Lebanon is we're not starting from zero. We already have a very strong reputation and position as a country of liberties, as a country of taste, of art, of culture.
Welcome to an episode of QuarterTones. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today in the studio we have Sharif Sehnaoui, who is a musician and the director of the Irtijal festival based in Beirut. Sharif, welcome to the series.
Hello, Mikey. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Maybe a good place to start is with what I just said. The Irtijal festival. People in Beirut know it. People in the world of experimental music also know it. But for people who don't know either of those scenes, how would you introduce Irtijal to people who are hearing about it for the first time?
We at some point called it an experimental music festival, but there is no such thing as a style called experimental music, it's not a thing. So why experimental music? Because it's a way to encompass very wide array of musical practices which share in common the idea to innovate, test new ideas, create new music that never existed in the best of cases, but also taking pre-existing musical styles but developing them in a way that is either very personal or has never been done before. So
yeah, when you started getting involved with experimental music, I'll use that term loosely.
Please.
When you first started getting involved with experimental music, was it a conscious choice? And no, I want to tap into this practice, or were you just messing around, just experimenting, trying to rid yourself of expectations of what this is supposed to sound like, or how to play this, or how to do this, or how to perform this?
No, it was an attraction I had to this kind of ideas or this kind of music that came from other people doing it that I heard or saw. It was not an immediate fascination. It took time. Mostly for me, the path brought me from independent rock to jazz, to free jazz, to free improvised music, and then experimental music, as a wider field.
Yeah. If I were to put 5 album covers in a row, okay, that charted that progression from I think you said indie rock, to jazz, to free jazz, to where you are now, what are the albums that you would, the lily pads to get across it?
Easy one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so basically Led Zeppelin. So I would pick the Anthology, which is a double CD, which is the one I heard the most at the time, which still today for me is fascinating. Then I would go to John Coltrane. So that would be either My Favorite Things or Ole. Mostly Ole was, My Favorite Things a better album, but Ole I heard more. The title track, at least, is exceptional. Was exceptional for me at the time. Is still exceptional. And then you would go, where am I now?
In free jazz.
An album by Pharoah Sanders called Black Unity, which is directly in the continuation of Coltrane, of course. Fifth would be Cecil Taylor, a solo album called Air Above Mountains. Not very well-known album, but it's one that had an impact on me. And in the fifth place, it's difficult because then you're in what we call like in the fringe between experimental music and free improvisation. And there I would, can I get two?
Yeah.
Thank you.
بيطلع لك نت.
Yeah, I would go to like a Keith Tippett solo piano called Musician 3 and an album by AMM called Inexhaustible Document. I mean, these two would be very unfamiliar to most people, but they are, they're not necessarily the best, but they're the ones who I heard the most and had a profound impact on me.
So if I were to track those 5 or 6 albums, right? What is the same across them and what gets stripped away to become more and more experimental?
The same I would say is that these are all musicians who are not taking the easy path of the style of music they're playing. They're all looking for ideas. They're all testing, trying new and different things. I mean, maybe the Led Zeppelin is not an album, it's an anthology, so it's from different albums. Maybe an alternative would be like, I don't know, Pink Floyd Umagumma, for example. So this is a rock album, but it sounds like no other rock album. So obviously these people, you know, had a desire to make something new and not repeat what was being done before them. Would be the same with Coltrane, would be the same with Pharoah Sanders, even in regard to Coltrane, who was his mentor. Would be the same with AMM. The funny thing is, if you go back, let's say I picked Umagumma by Pink Floyd and not Led Zeppelin. The funny thing is, little told story is that AMM, this kind of pioneers of free improvisation and like with a contemporary classical touch, a strange group in the history of music, pretty cult now, started late 60s, so they've been around for a long time. The funny thing is they were rehearsing in adjacent studios with Pink Floyd when they were just starting, both of them. And the story is that Pink Floyd people would hear very strange noises coming from the other studio, which they couldn't even relate to music. And that apparently was very attractive to them. So they would ask to sit in. Can we sit and hear what you are doing? And of course, they were most welcome, as far as I know. And you can see, if you look at some of the ideas they used, you can see that they and I think they asked, can we use this idea? Can we use this technique to the AMM people? So yeah, all, you know, for me, there are no boundaries. Like, all music can influence each other. There's, you know, it shouldn't be cloistered in a way. So,
have you ever heard somebody who says that they're making experimental music and thought to yourself, this is not experimental music?
Yes.
What I'm trying to see is, like, what is the sort of litmus test? Mm-hmm. At what point do you sort of cross the threshold past Coltrane, past Cecil Taylor, into experimental?
It's a very tough question. Especially that now there is so much of it that at some point, if you're repeating the experimental music of somebody else and not making any changes to it, so there are now subgenres in experimental music.
Yeah.
You know, stuff that was experimental is now a subgenre. I don't know. Like, let's say, ambient music is a style now. It's a genre. Initially, the first people who made ambient music were experimental.
Who, like Eno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eno is one of them.
Yeah.
Bill Laswell, people like this. So at the time it was innovative, and now it's a subgenre. So yeah, if it's just people playing the genre as it is, for me it's not experimental. Some people might disagree. It's fine, you know. It's not that strict. Similar to many subgenres. So yeah, it's a tough question. Honestly, it's a tough question. I think each example can be debatable.
Yeah.
You might say this is not experimental and actually be wrong, or say, this is great experimental music. It's actually not. So
yeah. Okay, I want to play a track from a project from, I think, 2005, the Butros Sessions, which includes 4 people, I believe: Christina Abdel-Noor, Mazen Kerbaj, you, and Inga Zak. I'm going to play a little bit. This is the second track off the album, and this is off of Bandcamp, so I'm going to play a little bit of it. I'm going to stop it here. We'll include this in the YouTube video. As a project like this, I'm curious how it feels to perform, and how it feels to listen to 20 years later. So in recording this album and sort of performing it in that moment, what state do you have to sort of gear yourself up for? Are you sort of meditating on some, intellectual thing that you're trying to tap into with the other players? Is there some sort of specific journey that you guys are trying to go on together? What is the experiment, so to speak?
This is from a specific period in, let's say, my musical career, where the main focus was something called free improvised music. It's also sometimes called European free improvised music to distinguish it from similar things in America. It's sometimes called non-idiomatic improvisation. It has many, many names. But the idea is to, of course, freely improvise, so nothing is decided before, nothing is predetermined. But also, it doesn't mean that you can actually play anything you want. It has to be completely free of pre-existing forms of music. So in the excerpt, for example, that you picked, most people who hear it will say, what is this? What are these sounds? Is there even instruments there? So obviously the objective, and it was a strong objective for us. You have Mazen on trumpet, Christine on saxophone, I'm playing guitar, and Ingar is playing drums. But you heard almost no drum sound, no sax sound, no trumpet, no guitar. So the idea was to see how you can use these instruments to make completely different sounds and create a different language with it. So that in that time frame, I would say this is like 6-7 years maybe of like total dedication to this free improvised practice, looking for sounds with the instrument, trying to figure out different ways, like almost like finding hidden possibilities within the instrument itself, to create a new language, which would be your musical language, distinguishable from other musical languages.
You're forcing yourself to subvert your expectations.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
How does it feel to listen to that music now, 20 years later?
For me, it's always been a live experience, not necessarily something to listen to, because you're missing the visual component, which is an essential component. So basically, how do you produce these sounds? There are specific tricks and techniques and things called preparation, things called extended technique. The movement is very important. So if you add to it the visual element, the music actually completely changes. In my experience, many people who will say like, this is horrible. It's horrible sound-wise. There is no music there. That same person, there's a chance if he watches, for example, exactly that track but performed live, might say, wow, I'm surprised, but I got totally into it, because it's easy to get into it once you understand what's actually going on, and it's playful, which something. I mean, of course, if you don't know it, so for example, somebody who knows that music well might enjoy listening to this CD and look and try to imagine how these sounds were created, because for him it's not strange. It's not something he doesn't understand. But if it is something you don't understand and you do not know, then you have literally zero chance to be able to listen to a track like this one.
Would you say the music that you're performing here is closer to almost an absurdist contemporary dance performance than it is to sort of like a traditional musical performance? Because it sounds like you're almost describing a dance. Like if I deleted the word music, it's almost like you're describing a contemporary dance performance, where it's like, oh, you need to see it, right? It's as much about the movements of the performers as it is about the sounds that you're hearing, right? It's almost a dance.
Sure. There are strong connections with what they call contemporary dance. I haven't heard the word absurdist before, but maybe.
I'm putting absurd because
I haven't heard about.
That's not a term that I'm using absurd as an adjective as opposed to as a like the noun.
Understood.
Because the reason why I say absurd is because there's humor. There is clearly a sense of humor in the creation of it. At least to me, when I'm watching these performances.
I have to disagree. There's not necessarily a sense of humor. It depends on the musician.
Okay.
Some musicians use that component. It's there. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But it's not necessarily the case. So most of the time you will find, I mean, um, how to say, it looks super easy to play, but it's actually extremely hard to play.
Yeah.
And I've seen this with my own eyes repeatedly. Musicians who think, wow, this is, anybody can do this.
Yeah.
And even skilled musicians think, I can do this. And you go like, do it. And they actually can't do it. And they realize, they're like, wow, this is much harder than I imagined. One of the things it requires is extreme focus. Like if you're playing a show, let's say this group you played, this quartet, which played a few shows back in those days, you go in a complete sort of like a trance.
Yeah.
There is no other way to go through the whole duration of the concert and do a good concert, at least in that style, without going into this trance, because the focus you need is very high. As opposed to composed music, where your focus is to play what you decided to play and not make any mistake and try to play it better, of course. So there is focus. Here, every second counts, because every second things can change, and you need to be able to quickly decide to move this way, or change what you are doing, take into account what everyone else is doing, and you don't know what they will do next. So you have absolutely no map of, like the narrative of the concert. The narrative doesn't exist. This is in a free improvisation. So you're constantly in a state of insecurity because you might ruin whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do it, so you need to listen very carefully to everybody else and figure out your way into this. So no, most of the time in this music you will find completely focused musicians, and in the cases of people who like this, you will find an extremely focused audience, and usually it's a very nice communion moment. The humor side of it, some musicians use it because it exists, for sure.
Yeah.
And also some extremely good musicians love to play on this. I personally don't really know how to do it, so I'm not one of those.
Interesting. That's funny that you say that. I wouldn't have guessed that. Because to subvert expectations, I mean, that's what humor is, right? If you break down, usually what makes people laugh at the most core level is a subversion of expectations, right? Somebody's walking, you expect them to keep walking, they slip on a banana peel, you subvert their expectation, right? That is the base of humor.
Right.
And to subvert these expectations, your own internal expectations, I think kind of requires a sense of playfulness. Which sometimes is not obvious, because sometimes you see experimental music, or I see experimental music, and it feels very serious, like we're doing some very serious thing. But there's playfulness behind it. I don't know. That's how it feels.
I totally agree. I mean, that's one of the interesting things when you go experimental, let's say. Everything is every direction is open to you. There is no set way to do it or to not do it. And then it's all a question of how well you can do it, I mean, you also the weird thing, I mean, the difficult thing is that if you want to play jazz or rock, you have a path, more or less, which is laid out for you, like whether it be going to school, rehearsing with a band, etc., etc., etc. Whereas in these styles of music, there is almost no school to teach it. It's like you need to build your own experience, build your own know-how. Many people don't actually make it. They try, but it doesn't go anywhere. So and this is pretty much trial and error, hit or miss situation in the first, I would say, 10 years of your musical experience. So, and in the best of cases, you find your way, you find your language, you find your ideas, and in the worst of cases, you actually have to quit at some point, I would say.
I want to skip all the way to a recent track from a project called QuarterTones, and the album is Bitter Balls. I want to play one of them now, and then we'll talk about it. It seems like this project is taking you back a little bit, almost returning slightly to the earlier steps in that album tree. Does it feel that way? Do you feel like, okay, I'm actually like going kind of back to some of my earlier roots, or does it feel like this progress and revolution?
Yeah, that's a tough question also.
Yeah.
Both, I would say both. Yeah, it's both, returning to things you have liked, things you have listened to in your childhood, but also later on. But also it feels like moving forward, like, taking some of the craziest stuff you're done and then framing it or recombining it with what we call more concrete elements. You can hear there's a pulse, a rhythm, at least there are chords, there's a riff. But the craziness is still there. I think. I don't like to see things in terms of moving forward or backwards, to be honest. For me, it's just all a continuum in a way. Things lead to something else. It's almost like always moving forward necessarily. And there's nothing I would say there's nothing I do not do anymore. Like, I still do what I used to do before. I also do new things, and the more I diversify the music I'm doing, the happier I am, and the less bored I am with myself. So, so I really enjoy this project. Karkhana is like certainly one of the best or my favorite things I've done in my life. So, so yeah, that track you played, at least from that album, is an unbelievable track to play live. You usually play it at the end of the set, and it's like an explosion.
Yeah, it's the last track on the project as well.
It's the last track because it's the last track on the live set as well. And in the live, like the sound can become monumental. And
when's the last time you performed it live?
I do not remember.
Yeah.
We played. I don't know when we stopped playing Bitter Balls. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we played it in maybe 2017 or 18. In a set where we played basically almost all the tracks we had on our different albums, and that live is now released on vinyl. It's called Al Azraqain. It's the full live set. It's a double vinyl. Beyond that, the next time we met, we composed new pieces. So the last time we played, which was 2022 maybe, 23, 2022, we played completely new tracks. We didn't play the older tracks again.
You know, I want to talk about live performance more and venues. And I told you before we started that I really want to understand the other legs of the table, right? If you want to build a thriving artistic musical scene, right, that isn't just a commercial scene, that is pushing boundaries, emphasizing and valuing creativity, rewarding creativity, there needs to be a few legs to the table besides just the musicians. And I would imagine that includes venues, financial support, promotion, concert goers. I don't know what other legs of the table are needed, but since I have you here, it would be really useful for me to understand the architecture of a scene. How do you create an artistic music scene that is thriving, or surviving in a place like Beirut?
Yeah, for me, the main element. So I'm going to go a bit contrary to what you said. For me, the main element is the musicians.
طبعا.
How to make them comfortable, how to, open possibilities for them to perform, but not only to perform, also to evolve, to gain confidence in, let's say, the crazy ideas they had, or how to push them to go beyond whatever music they are doing. At least that's more or less my objective, let's say, as a somebody who created a festival and a platform, mostly Irtijal, but dozens of other events. We organized commissions, workshops, etc., in our 24 years of activity. And once the musicians, let's say, show strengths in a way, the rest wouldn't normally follow. There will be people who are asking for this. There will be people who are helping them out of love and passion for the actual music. And I think this is where we are in Lebanon still today. So there has been various degrees of, let's say, funding possibilities, various degrees of marketing possibilities. It comes and goes. So now, for example, we're in a moment where it's gone for various reasons. But what remains is the dedication and the passion of a lot of people, a lot of individuals. Among them, somebody like Fadi Tabbal, for example, who you mentioned having on this show. So Fadi could be a top recording engineer in, any studio around the globe, I would say, more or less. But he's somebody who has a true passion for the scene here and for the musicians who are here, and he has chosen, between his career, his income, let's say, and working for the people he loves, and for things he believes in. Would be the same with somebody who's not a musician, for example, Ziad Naufal, who was the director of Irtijal for a while. He left the country some years ago, but so for 3 years he wasn't there. But he came back this year just for the festival, for Irtijal festival, and there was no one paying for him to come back or asking him to come back, but he had the urge and the necessity to come back, because also for him this is something like no other, like the music scene in Lebanon, the musicians, he believes, for whom he still works as the director of Ruptured, which is releasing a lot of amazing music still today, still like he doesn't physically have to be here to do it. So yeah, it's sadly it is still based on individual motivation and passion, and I wouldn't say this is specific to experimental music.
Yeah.
It's all the music fields is like this. There is no music scene here. So if you get out of people who are big on TV, let's say, and few stars we have of pop music, the jazz scene struggles, the classical musicians struggle, the rock scene struggles, everybody struggles. Why? Because the country has not really invested in a way. Put invested under quotations in the music scene, and it's a shame. It's a mistake. It could be extremely beneficial to the country at all levels.
So I want to understand that. I believe that in my gut to be true. I'm a musician. I come from a family of musicians. I just take that for granted. Societies are better with music. I just take it for granted. But let's say I didn't take it for granted, and I'm some billionaire from wherever, and I want to repatriate my money and come back to Lebanon and reinvest my money. And me and you are having coffee. We're stuck, we happen to be sitting next to each other getting a manouche. And I ask you, what do you do? And you say, I'm an experimental, I run an experimental music festival, or I'm a musician, or I do this, I do that. And I say, oh, interesting. I've heard great things about the music scene in Lebanon, and I think that I've heard it needs investment. But quite frankly, I'm not convinced that there is real return on investment, that it will actually help the society. What would be your argument to these types of funders, who is not, she is interested, but isn't fully over the edge, isn't fully convinced? What is the most convincing argument that you've found helps people understand?
Well, that guy wants a return on investment to himself?
No, to the country.
To the country. Sure. No, the numbers are very clear, Mike. It has added value at all levels. It's creating jobs. It creates exports, because the musicians, as they develop, perform around the globe, bring money back. So that's export, which we are lacking a lot in this country, as you know. It boosts tourism. It boosts the image of the country and boosts the economy. And this is extremely clear with very little investment, very little investment. So you're putting in very little money and getting a lot of money everywhere else, through not only music but art and culture in general. It's a very simple mathematical equation which almost doesn't fail. If you're starting from zero, you might have a long way, but the thing in Lebanon is we're not starting from zero. We already have a very strong reputation and position as a country of liberties, as a country of taste, of art, of culture, the food as well. So, for example, I could do the analogy with food. So, how much do you benefit from food? Why is food so important? Because food will give the impression that Lebanon has a know-how, like maybe the numbers, if you just see, how much food we actually sell or how much Lebanese restaurants around the globe does. So it's probably a decent number, but it will also help to attract people to Lebanon who want to actually taste the real thing.
Yeah.
It will also create the image that the Lebanese are, people with skills and people with a culture. So it's exactly the same, more or less exactly the same with art, culture, music, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
No, it's a very
why does everybody dream to go to the USA? Let's say, not that I dream to go to the USA, but generally around the globe. You've watched their movies, heard their music, and you believe, wow, this is the place I want to go to. So it's very, very simple. I'm vulgarizing, but this is a very simple equation that doesn't require a lot. And we are in a position because we are already considered, the place for art within the Arab world. Like we almost have no competition now, sadly. But we could capitalize on it and benefit from it so much at all levels. But please go convince this billionaire, if you can. It hasn't worked yet. Anyway, we have no policy, so now we're not even there. Like, I worked some years ago to remove a tax. Just remove a tax which was getting very little money to the state, tax on getting a foreign musician to perform here. It's a small tax, fixed fee, very poorly thought, like if you are Madonna playing in a stadium for all of Lebanon, or if you're just here playing a small show, it's the same tax. It's has a little or to no impact. So just getting this removed was like completely impossible. You need now it's even more difficult. You need a parliament that actually convenes. You need a government to execute the orders. So now anyway, this is not possible. But also talking to people in charge in Lebanon, you go, you have a mountain to climb, which is like, art is not just for people who don't work, like people who don't want to work, so they're a burden to society because they don't want to work, so they do art, good luck getting this across.
Do you feel, if you were giving yourself advice 30 years ago, 20 years ago, what advice would you have given younger Sharif who was taking on this career? Or maybe you don't even think of it as a career. Maybe you think of it as, I'm just working, I'm living day by day. But somebody who is deciding, and no, I'm going to spend a career and, pay my rent and eat my breakfast, pay for my breakfast off this trade. What advice would you give that guy?
Yeah, keep doing what you do, I would say. Just easy. I don't know. You're asking me to give advice to myself or to somebody else who would be in my position
No, to yourself, like
at the time.
with 2020 hindsight.
I don't know. Clearly, I would have told myself to come back to Lebanon earlier because I was abroad. I came back to Lebanon in 2008, and I've been here since. And probably the only advice I would give myself is like come back in 2003, 2004. That's this is where I consider that I've grew the most, and this is where I have the most motivation to do things.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably an advice I would give. I still give this advice to people, like stay in Lebanon, come back to Lebanon. Maybe it's silly. Maybe it's a mistake, but because you don't know what's gonna happen in the country.
Yeah.
But I truly believe we should not give up. I truly think we should. I personally would like to keep fighting until it's no longer possible to fight. But so.
Do you feel like your work is an act of resistance?
Totally, yes.
Really?
Of course. Yeah. It's
Tell
totally.
me more.
Well, as far as you are striving to build something new, something else, something different, you are necessarily, a militant in a way. You're necessarily going against the tides. Also, on the topic we were discussing before, you're pushing because you want art and culture, all of it, to be valorized in the right way, to be, as you said, an important part of the society, because the society will be healthier. I like that thing you used.
Yeah.
That it's also a sign of a healthy society. So yeah, definitely.
I'm curious about the region that we're in, right? You were saying, Lebanon at this point, even though we look like we are 10 steps back, we have such a strong base artistically. The way I think about it is like we have all the fruit, vegetables, and everything like that. Like the oven's broken, best, and the refrigerator is broken, best. We have so much potential food. We just need a few things to help us cook it up. I want you to compare the sort of the quality of the music, or maybe not compare, but maybe we'll talk about musicians from across the region as well. Some of whom are living in countries maybe with more funding, less liberty maybe, under worse situations in some cases, in Palestine, for example, in Sudan. But I'd love to know, because you're so close to the ground, what are some of the other trends or other musicians that you're seeing from other scenes in other places, whether it's Syria or Sudan or Morocco or Wayne Macan?
Yeah, you have like sprouts everywhere. That's beautiful to see. It's not always been like this. So for us, the first time we heard of people in other countries, Arab countries, also involved into some sort of an experimental approach were people in Egypt. So we were like super excited, like around 2004, 2005. And it seemed to us like, wow, honestly, have to admit that I didn't know much about the history of Egyptian culture. I mean, the popular thing, of course, but I didn't know there was always some sort of a subculture that even people around big divas like Kulthum, if you take like Baligh Hamdi and Omar Khurshid, were actually pretty insane avant-garde musicians. So this I learned later on. So now I'm not surprised that there's always going to be amazing stuff coming out of Egypt. But beyond Egypt, you have Tunis, lately Jazair, Morocco for sure, Iraq, Syria. Most people know them, at least in Lebanon. Palestinian musicians, seen in Jordan. So over time, you discover that these are more or less blooming, but they don't have the history or the possibilities that we have in Lebanon or in Egypt. But currently in Egypt, the regime is extremely oppressive, so they moved backwards, sadly. So, and the reaction to Lebanon is clear. Like, they're all like, you are so lucky there, you know. Yeah. And I like to remind Lebanese people also sometimes, you know, we are really so lucky here compared to other Arab countries. And I've been around, so I know how difficult it is for them. You know? Finding a venue to play, you know, like it's not that easy. For us, like there is multitudes of venue, dozens of places, people extremely dedicated to building, you know, a place that is open to everybody to perform anything. You know, like take, I don't know, Metro El Medina as an example. And they're sustainable. These venues are sustainable somehow, because also there's audience, because there is enough people who believe in art, in music, so that it can go on. Whereas it's not necessarily the case yet, but I think it will change. We some years ago went into a partnership with a festival in Kurdistan, in Suleymaniya, in Kurdistan, called Space 21. The first time I went there, when we started the partnership in 2017, it was just this few people doing an experimental music festival with maybe 10, 20 people would come to the shows. They'd find it really weird. But it went on. We're still like, the partnership with them is still very solid. I was there last year. They're already like having hundreds of people, full venues. It took them 6-7 years, but they build it. Yeah. They build it the right way. So that is possible to do in any country if you have the right people doing, you know, the right work with the right motivation.
Amazing. Okay, last question. I'm going to add, if you were to give people, like, maybe, let's say 5 recommendations that you think who are interested in this, like, experimental practice, experimental approach to music, what 5 records would you recommend?
What's with the 5?
10, 30, 13.
I'm just
6.
kidding. No, of course. 5 is...
minus 4.
Yeah, I definitely go on some of those that were in my first 5. So I definitely recommend people like Keith Tippett and Cecil Taylor, as they're both pianists, but they have very different approaches. And for me, these different approaches to the piano are keys that can be very helpful to somebody who wants to get into this. Maybe because the piano is such a familiar instrument as well to everyone. There is a group which also has piano, but it's not really about the piano, called The Necks, like The Neck. Yeah. But it's The Necks, which is an Australian trio, which we have had perform here once, which their music is unbelievable. It's not really classifiable. It could be a bit of jazz. It could have some of, you know, rock. It could have some of experimental. They really do their own thing, and they're pretty easy for people who want, you know, to understand how things can be done differently. This, by experience, I realized. They give keys, basically. to these people. What else? I don't know. It would really depend on the person. If you have a jazz background, I would recommend different records than if you had, you're coming from classical music, or if you're coming from rock.
Yeah.
So I would really go differently, or from heavy metal, if you're coming from rock and heavy metal, I would go listen to the work, I don't know, Scott Walker did, or Son O, or things like this. Really, everybody has his own path. I'm not sure, but the only advice I would really give to everybody is go watch live music.
Yeah,
that's clear.
What are your favorite venues in Lebanon to watch or to perform? So if somebody's visiting and they're in town for 2 weeks, what venues are you like? You should.
So yeah, definitely. If you get the chance to go to a place called Frequent Defect, it's the name of the collective. Their venue is called the Mkalles Warehouse. I would definitely push people to go there. It's the main focus is electronic music, but they do also very different things. The more they go, the more they're diversifying, which is great. But mostly they managed to create the first venue, at least, and they've been around and they're still around, and it's the first venue which is fully dedicated to music. Like, they're doing all the work needed so that it's a real music venue.
Cool.
In terms of equipment, sound system, calibrating the sound system, improving the sound, hospitality to the musicians who play there.
How big is it? How many seater, or what's the capacity?
It looks like a club, like an industrial type club room. Can fit in, I don't know, 400 people maybe. I'm not sure.
Great, cool.
But also their events last 10 hours sometimes. So in the end, there's thousands of people who come in rotation.
Very cool.
Yeah. Like, that's a place definitely that I recommend. Metro El Medina's unbelievable, of course. Like, also in the, it's much more diverse, so you can see anything.
Yeah.
And all of Lebanon's music creation you can see at Metro. Like, these are the two, for me, music venues that are, made for live bands. Some years ago we still have the Ballroom Blitz, which is fantastic. But the current direction is more to electronic music, so definitely a place to go for this. But hopefully they will return. I know they want to return to more live.
Cool. Well, Sharif, thanks so much. This was a eye-opening conversation. Lots of recommendations. I appreciate it. People can find Sharif's work online on Bandcamp. You can listen to a lot of this stuff on YouTube also. So thanks so much.
Thanks to you, Mickey.